Hey everybody, Brian Von VA here, back at it again. Today we're talking about some of those niche little rules that other people may not know or understand. If you got one that you don't think a lot of people know or, well, they don't quite understand it, leave it in the comments below and give us a lot of details. I think a lot of newbies are surprised to find out that the only spell you can cast is a cantrip if you cast another spell as a bonus action. I think a lot of veterans are surprised to find out invisible doesn't mean undetectable in combat. It prevents targeted spells and grants some advantage/disadvantage, but the enemy still knows your location until you take the action, or bonus action if you're a rogue, to hide. Building off of the invisibility thing, by the way, technically invisibility grants you advantage on attacks and disadvantage to enemy attacks. This is without saying that that's contingent on you actually not being visible to that creature. And Jeremy Crawford confirms that that's intentional. Apparently, narratively, you're supposed to be still all shimmery and half invisible even to true sight, which is not specified anywhere naturally. Needless to say, this is an incredibly stupid rule, and you should ignore it. But it is technically both rules as written and rules as intended. That's what RAW and RAI mean. Being incapacitated doesn't stop you from moving. Incapacitated. An incapacitated creature can't take actions or reactions. So if you're hit by Tasha's hideous laughter, which causes you to fall prone, becoming incapacitated and unable to stand up for the duration, you can still crawl around. Incapacitated is often the result of something else that also locks your movement down, such as being paralyzed, stunned, or unconscious. So this gets overlooked. Related to having your action removed from the combat chapter of the player's handbook. Anything that deprives you of your ability to take actions also prevents you from taking a bonus action. I think this one is intuitive and how it's virtually always run, but I've seen it questioned a few times when players were reading what they could do when incapacitated and then wanted to use a bonus action. Also, notably, being incapacitated is on the list of things that break concentration. Normal activity, such as moving and attacking, doesn't interfere with concentration. The following factors can, however, break concentration. Casting another spell that requires concentration. You lose concentration on a spell if you cast another spell that requires concentration because you can't concentrate on two spells at once. Taking damage. Whenever you take damage while you are concentrating on a spell, you must make a Constitution saving throw to maintain your concentration. The DC equals 10 or half the damage you take, whichever number is higher. If you take damage from multiple sources, such as an arrow and a dragon's breath, you make a separate saving throw for each source of damage. And lastly, being incapacitated or obviously killed. You lose concentration on a spell if you are incapacitated or if you die. Well, who would have thunked it? If you die, you can't concentrate anymore. The more you know! It's rare for someone to know the chase rules, as they're very niche, and frankly, not great. Whenever I need to do a quick chase, I'll usually have it be a skill challenge or regular combat instead of using the official chase rules. Can someone list it down in the comments below? Chase rules, everybody. Anyone can identify a magic item by spending an hour with it. No spells necessary. You know what is a great early level item goal for a group? 100 gold to buy a pearl. You know what makes for a great side quest reward for a low level group? A pearl. You know what makes great roleplay? Having players speak with items or learn about them while they use identify. I decided long ago to ignore this rule, and it's been nothing but positive. On the subject of readying spells. While I knew that a caster has to concentrate for the duration of casting a spell with a casting time longer than one action, I hadn't realized that they don't lose the spell slot if they're interrupted before it's complete. Player Handbook, page 202. If the trigger set for a readied spell doesn't occur, the caster still loses the spell slot. Player Handbook, page 192. Making an opportunity attack requires that the attacker sees their target. Player's Handbook, page 195. Tagging onto readying a spell to cast as a reaction. It's cast on your turn, but released on your reaction. This means creative use of cover can prevent counterspell shenanigans. Readying a spell, however, uses your concentration, which makes you drop concentration on any spell you already had active. This one is pretty simple. That dark vision lets you see in darkness as if it were dim light. The part I think people forget, in dim light, perception checks that rely on sight are made at disadvantage. I feel like a lot of people don't understand how good blindsight is, especially when playing fighters without taking a race that has dark vision. As other people in this thread have already discussed, invisibility, or being in the dark when your enemy doesn't have dark vision, doesn't mean your enemy doesn't know where you are, as long as you haven't made the effort to hide. So that V-human polearm master fighter who could normally be pretty hamstrung in darkness, magical or otherwise, if they took another fighting style, is actually big chillin' if they took blind fighting. 10 feet of blind sight is enough to cover every part of polearm master, and it prevents melee enemies from having advantage when attacking you. Assuming their reach is not greater than 10 feet, of course. Additionally, it cuts right through the advantage-disadvantage mire that happens when a fog cloud gets cast. Blind sight doesn't care. You're happily hacking away at advantage while the enemy with true sight can't see you because fog cloud is not illusory and thus foils true sight. I had blind fighting on my Zealot 5, Ranger 2 in a campaign once, and let me tell you, it was so much more useful than I ever expected it to be. Every time it came up, I was suddenly the most powerful party member at the table by a wide margin. Heck, we had a warlock and they cast Hunger of Hadar, which notably isn't even magical darkness, it's just a black void. They cast it on a group of enemy combatants and I just leapt right into the middle of it and went on a straight killing spree. Additionally, I'm in another campaign right now with a party member who is a barbarian fighter and I am a shadow sorcerer. They just grabbed that fighter level and went with blind fighting because they are a Goliath, and I can't wait to finally cast darkness with my feature so I can see into it and watch that barbarian go crazy. When you die, you drop attunement on all your magical items, so any character that gets revivified in the middle of combat can no longer rely on their attuned magic items to help them until they get the time to short rest. Can someone actually expand on this in the comments for clarification for me specifically? I really need to know how that functions because I always wondered if you died and came back, would your items technically be bound to the original soul or to the revived soul, which is still basically the original, just with more seasonings on it because you had to come back from the dead. Grapple rules. They are simple but barely noted due to how little there are. Seen some think it was a full action to grapple when it replaces an attack, so with multi-attack you can try until you run out of hands or attacks. Also, that it is athletics versus athletics or acrobatics. I usually see it ruled as an attack rule. Generally speaking, you're not meant to know what the spell is you're countering when you cast Counterspell. It's meant to be a gamble unless a reaction introduced in Xanathar's is used to find out what it is. It is a reaction to the casting of a spell. You're reacting to the components, not the explosion. And my party is surprised every time I remind them that they crit on paralyzed opponents. For important fights where counterspell is going to come into play, we use spell cards. The caster says they're casting a spell and places the card face down. They mark the slot they used on their sheet in case they upcast. When we play digitally, the caster can just whisper this info to a player DM that wasn't directly involved in the action. Their character isn't in the fight, they're playing a non-caster, someone who already used their reaction this round, etc., etc. Everyone has a couple of seconds to declare that they counter, and if so, at what level. The card is flipped up, rolls are made, and things go on from there. Definitely not worth it for every fight, but important wizard battles get even more tactical and no one has to worry about meta knowledge being used intentionally or subconsciously. I really like that idea. Because of its 5 to 15 range, you normally can't actually use a net without disadvantage. That is, unless you have the sharpshooter feat and attack at its 10 foot to 15 foot range, or you take crossbow expert feat to attack at the 5 foot range without disadvantage. It's funny how you need traits to use it without disadvantage. Monks, actually anyone, but it's most relevant to monks of course, auto-succeed on grapple or shove attempts against stunned targets. It was hard to find for me because it wasn't even in my player's handbook. It was in one of the erratas. Similar, but less hidden. Open Hand Monk also has similar synergy with stun and their flurry, shoves, and knockdowns, since stunned targets auto-fail dex and strength saves. Ooh, that's really nice. I was actually kind of pissed off about it the other day because the conditions only mentioned saves, but now I see they did errata the grappling and shoving rules to say the target auto-fails if it's incapacitated. Something that always surprises at least someone, and has been a massive wake-up for me, is shoving while grappled as a strength-based character. Mechanically, a shove is almost identical to escaping a grapple, just that the target is swapped and therefore the person who can choose acrobatics swaps too. If you are grappled and have extra attack, instead of using your action to try to escape the grapple, shove the creature grappling you. If their reach is equal to or less than yours, you are able to shove them so that you are further away from them than the extent of their reach. On a success, you escape the grapple in the place of an attack rather than an action. That's the explanation that covers the edge cases, but simplified for when everyone involved has the standard 5-foot reach. If you are grappled, you can shove the creature in place of one attack instead of taking your action to escape a grapple. Ta-da! Climbing is athletics, never ever acrobatics. Acrobatics is purely keeping balance. So whenever you do anything that requires your muscles or strength, jumping, climbing, grabbing onto something, you use athletics. Allowing people to use acrobatics just shafts strength into even more of a dump stat that has absolutely no downsides when neglected or put at a low value. This is very true. I think this is because most characters dump strength, but tend to have at least a little in dexterity, so of course they try to argue to use acrobatics. Now I believe a similar thing happens with wisdom. People will often talk about how wisdom is the common sense stat and intelligence is purely memorization and book education, or, in my opinion, academic knowledge. So they argue a low-int, high-whiz person will generally be very competent and strategically capable. They just don't know advanced mathematics. Whereas a high-int, low-whiz person will often make very obvious and stupid mistakes because they lack common sense. In reality, wisdom is almost entirely just how keen your senses are and reading the room and arguably emotional control for saves. Common sense. While intelligence covers everything from education, memory, logical thinking, and deductive reasoning. I would say that's academic knowledge. People just ignore that in roleplay though, because they always want to dump int for whiz, and they'd rather just be ignorant than face the fact that an 8-int character is pretty mentally dull. Hey everybody, Brian Von VA checking in after the vid. Please make sure to leave a like, subscribe, ring the bell, and let us know in the comments below what kind of rule or exemption or something that is niche and people may not know or quite understand. We love you all. Please be safe, happy, and healthy. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.